Hi guys, so it's come up a few times actually under several of my videos, the question of what we call side rings. Now these are perhaps most famously shown on these main gauche or left-hand daggers, whereby you have a ring on one side but not the other. Now it should be pointed out that that's also true of when side rings first appeared on swords, in fact, was in the late 15th century. And in the late 15th century we see finger rings, which what we call fingering the guard, which means sticking your finger over the quillon. You get a guard over here, which I've shown and talked about before in previous videos. But one of the next things to appear is a side ring. So I'm using a dagger here because it's easier to show on screen, but if you imagine that this is a sword with a side ring, and the side ring goes on the side of your hand where the back of your hand and your knuckles are. Okay? The reason being that if you look at my hand, very simply, it sticks out more on one side than the other. When I'm holding an object, most of the hand is sticking out on this side, and all that's really sticking out on this side is my thumb and my fingertips. Okay? So the side ring is there protecting most of the meat of my hand, and it's true whether it's a left-hand dagger or whether it's a sword. Okay, so often the guards, the additional, what we call complex hilted weapons, so they develop from these kind of simple things into something like a rapier hilt. You'll notice that the rapier, usually, unless it's a cup hilt or something like this, or certain types of side sword, very often they're not symmetrical. They have more extensive rings on one side than the other. Okay, and that's because these rings on the outside developed before the rings on the inside. Okay, so the rings and bars on the inside are really just there to protect your thumb and your fingers, and this is there really to protect more of your hand, as it were. There's also a question of the way that assuming you're a right person versus a right-handed person versus a right-handed person, there's also a question about the angles that the blades oppose each other at. And in crossing, what you find is the outside of the hand, that is this side of my hand, is more exposed in the bind, i.e. crossing blades, than the inside of my hand is. So I'll just try, and this is a bit tricky to demonstrate, but I'll try and demonstrate here. So imagine I'm holding the left-hand dagger, so now the outside of my hand is the other side. So notice I've turned the dagger around to protect the outside of my hand. Now, if I'm defending against a rapier blade here, you'll notice, bam, if I defend on the blade and that slides down, that side ring now protects, just change the grip on the sword here, protects the outside of my hand from getting hit. Okay, can you see that? Even if it's quite an oblique angle, the blade can no longer hit the outside of my hand, and in no direction. Yeah, all the way around it protects the back of my hand. Now, if I switch the sword around so it's, this is a bit tricky, so it's the other way, if it comes over this side, you'll see that there is no hand to hit, because my hand doesn't stick out on that side. Okay, so it can come down quite an oblique angle, and so long as I've got my thumb either flat on the blade or angled like that, obviously I don't hold it in a hammer fist with my thumb there, but if I angle it in my grip as I would do in reality, there's nothing really of my hand to get hit on this side. So that's why side rings are always held on the outside. And I should point out there are a few movies and TV TV sort of series where you can see people that have a sword or a dagger with a side ring, and they're holding it the wrong way around, so that's a nice thing to look out for. Don't know if any of you remember, there used to be a series called Crossbow, The Legend of William Tell, and I always remember, even as a kid, I realised there was a guy using a side ring sword in that, and he was used to hold it the wrong way around, probably because someone had told him it was there to protect his thumb. But anyway, so you should always make sure, if you've only got one side ring, that it's to the outside, and this applies to swords and daggers. Okay? Cheers.